The wind moved through the trees with a low sound, as if the forest was whispering secrets no one could hear. The sky above was dark with heavy clouds, and thunder rolled far in the distance like the growl of a sleeping beast. Captain Rayner sat on the old wooden chair outside his cabin with a metal cup in his hand and a quiet mind that had seen too many battles. Beside him lay Bolt, his loyal dog, with ears always alert and eyes always watching. The forest was calm, but Bolt suddenly stood up, his body tense and nose high in the air. He growled softly, then barked once loud and sharp, and ran into the woods. Rayner dropped his cup and grabbed his rifle from the wall before following Bolt without a second thought. The night swallowed him as he entered the trees, the air thick with mist and silence. Only the sound of broken twigs under his boots and Bolt's distant barking guided him deeper. Minutes passed like hours, and then he saw a strange blue light between the trees. He slowed his steps, heart beating fast and breath steady from years of training there in a small clearing. Bolt stood frozen in front of something that looked not of this world. Rayner raised his rifle and stepped closer, eyes fixed on the strange shape on the ground. It was a body, not human, not machine, but something between both, a creature with gray skin, glowing veins, and armor cracked from a hard fall. Its eyes blinked weakly, and it made a sound like static mixed with a whisper. Bolt did not bark. He stood still, like he knew this thing was not a threat. Rayner looked at his dog, then at the alien and back again, and his grip on the rifle loosened. The alien raised one hand, shaking, and pointed toward the sky, then toward Rayner. Its mouth moved, but the words were lost in the broken sound of pain. Then it collapsed back to the ground, eyes closing slowly like a machine running out of power. Rayner knelt down, his soldier mind racing with questions. Why is an alien here alone and injured? Where is the rest of its kind? Is this a trap or something else? Bolt moved closer and sniffed the alien's face, then sat down beside it, guarding instead of attacking. Rayner knew that animals sensed danger better than humans, and Bolt's calm behavior told him something strange was happening. The alien opened one eye and whispered a word that sounded like help in a broken voice. Rayner stood up and looked around. The forest was quiet again, but something had changed. The air felt heavy like before a storm, but the sky was still and the trees did not move. He had fought aliens in space, on ships and in ruined cities, but never thought one would fall at his door. He had seen what they could do and what they had done to Earth. But now here lay one dying and asking for help. Rayner looked down at Bolt, who looked up at him without fear. He had always trusted Bolt, and Bolt was not wrong often. He took a deep breath and made his decision. He lifted the alien onto his shoulder, surprised at how light it was for its size. Bolt led the way back through the forest with quick, silent steps. The blue light faded behind them and darkness returned. Rayner reached his cabin and placed the alien on the table in the underground bunker he had built for safety long ago. He checked its wounds and saw deep burns and metal shards in the flesh. He used what supplies he had and did his best to stop the bleeding and clean the wounds. The alien stirred and whispered something that made no sense. Then its body went still, but its chest still moved slowly. Bolt lay beside it, watching with eyes that glowed in the dark like stars under the earth. Rayner sat back in his chair and looked at both of them, and for the first time in years, he did not know what to do next. He only knew this night was not normal and the future had just taken a new path. The forest had given a signal and Bolt had heard it. Now it was Rayner's turn to listen. The cold air inside the underground bunker was heavy with silence, as if even the shadows were afraid to speak. Captain Rayner stood over the table where the alien lay, its breathing slow and uneven, the pale glow of its skin now dim and cracked. Bolt sat near the door, his ears twitching and eyes fixed on every small sound in the distance. Rayner had seen soldiers die and machines fail, but this creature was neither fully alive nor entirely dead. He reached out to check the bandages again, and suddenly the alien's hand grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Its eyes opened wide, filled with fear, pain, and something else, something close to desperation. Rayner froze as the alien struggled to speak, its voice a broken mix of static echo and strange clicks. Then slowly the words began to take shape, simple but clear enough to understand. My name is Kale, not here to fight, must warn. Rayner did not reply. Instead he waited, eyes locked with Kale's, searching for lies behind the words. Kale coughed a strange sound like metal grinding on stone, then pointed to a small device on his belt. Rayner took it carefully, unsure of its purpose. When he touched the side of it, a soft blue light spread across the bunker and images filled the air around them. Memories. Kale's memories. A planet far away, a council of powerful voices, a decision made in secret, a mission started with hope then turned into horror. Kale had tried to stop the invasion. He had warned his leaders that Earth was not what they believed it to be, that humans were not weak, that they would fight, and they did. But Kale's warnings were ignored, and when he refused to follow orders, they turned on him. He escaped in a stolen pod, chased and hunted until he crashed into the woods near Rain. Home. The memories faded as Kale fell back. Breathing hard, Rayner stood in silence, the truth heavy in his mind like armor made of stone. This alien, this enemy, had risked everything to protect a planet not his own. But why? Kale spoke again, voice weaker than before. Second wave coming, not soldiers, not war. Harvest. Rayner stepped back, trying to understand the word harvest. Kale nodded, then pointed to a metal map folded inside his armor. Rayner opened it and saw coordinates flashing in red deep in the forest not far from his cabin. Something buried, something dangerous, or maybe something important before he could ask more. Cale closed his eyes again, body shaking from the effort of speaking. Bolt moved closer and licked Cale's hand as if trying to comfort him. Rayner could not believe what he was seeing. His dog, a trained war companion, was showing kindness to an enemy. Maybe Cale was not the enemy after all. The thought stayed in his mind like a whisper that would not leave. He knew he could not leave Cale alone in this state, but he also needed to know what was buried at those coordinates. He looked at Bolt and gave a simple command: guard. Bolt barked once, low and calm, then sat beside Cale, ready to protect. Rayner grabbed his rifle, a flashlight, and a small medkit just in case he stepped into the forest again, the trees tall and silent, like old watchers hiding secrets behind every branch. The map led him through a narrow path covered in fog and strange sounds. After almost an hour he reached a spot where the ground felt wrong, too soft, too smooth, too perfect. He started digging, using a sharp edge of metal from a fallen satellite nearby. Soon he hit something hard, cold and humming, quietly, a hidden alien pod half buried in the earth. He cleared the dirt and pressed his hand against the surface. It responded to his touch, opening slowly with a hiss of steam and light. Inside was a small sphere covered in symbols glowing blue and green. It floated slightly above its base like it was alive, waiting for purpose. Rayner reached for it, and the sphere lit up brighter, showing more images like before. But these were different. They showed Earth being scanned, mapped, prepared for something, not just war but extraction. Human cities marked with red dots, people shown like energy units, counted, measured, classified. It was not just invasion, it was a plan to use humans as fuel. The truth burned in Rayner's mind sharper than any weapon he had carried. Cale had risked everything to stop this, and now he had brought that warning to the one man who might still believe in doing what is right. Rayner took the sphere, wrapped it carefully, and began to walk back. The forest felt colder now, the wind stronger, the sky above darker than before. Something had changed, and he knew the next steps would not be easy. But he also knew one thing for certain: Cale was no longer the enemy. The forest was darker than before, as if it knew what Rayner carried in his hands, a sphere not meant for Earth, glowing softly in the silence like a hidden heart beating in the ground. Every tree seemed to lean closer, every leaf seemed to whisper a warning, yet Rayner walked steady, guided by purpose, not fear. His boots pressed into the wet soil, his breath slow and focused as the cold wind moved past him like a ghost from another world. Behind him the pod closed again, the earth beginning to swallow it, as if trying to keep its secret hidden once more. But the secret was no longer buried now. It lived in Rayner's hands, and the thoughts racing through his mind. Bolt greeted him at the cabin with a soft bark, not loud, not urgent, but alert and ready as always. Cale was awake again, his skin flickering with faint light, and his eyes filled with a strange sadness mixed with relief. Rayner placed the sphere on the table between them, and Cale looked at it with a deep pain in his expression, as if he had seen it before and wished he never had. Cale reached for the sphere, and it rose into the air on its own, casting light across the walls, showing a map of Earth and then another planet far away, then lines connecting them like veins through space. Rayner watched as new images appeared, machines falling from the sky into oceans, deserts, forests. They planted themselves deep in the earth and began to grow like roots, feeding on energy, waiting for a signal. Cale spoke, slowly, each word sharp with effort. They are not just here to fight, they are here to take. Rayner stepped closer, eyes locked on the floating map, and the red marks now glowing across human cities. Every major power center, every energy hub, every place where life was full, targets, harvest points. The truth was deeper than war, it was older than fear, it was survival for them, and extinction for us. Cale pointed at a spot on the map marked in white, a single location not touched by red, hidden safe. Unknown to the others, Rayner understood without words this was where they could strike back, or where something waited that could help. He looked at Cale, then at Bolt, then at the weapons hung on his wall, like memories from a life he had tried to forget. He began preparing. Cale tried to stand, but his body gave way and he fell back with a hiss of pain and a quiet growl of frustration. Bolt moved beside him, nudging his arm with a gentle push, as if saying, "You are not alone." Rayner paused for a moment, watching the strange bond growing between dog and alien, something even humans failed to form with each other. There was no fear in Bolt's eyes, only trust. Rayner returned to his task, loading supplies, checking the map again, packing the sphere inside a steel box lined with old blankets. Outside, the sky began to shift, clouds moving fast, lightning flashing in the far distance, not from nature but from machines in the sky. A low rumble passed through the ground, as if the earth itself was afraid. Rayner looked up and knew they were watching now. Maybe they had sensed the sphere, maybe they had sensed Cale. Time was running out. He moved quickly, attaching a tracker jammer to the steel box, then securing the entrance of the bunker. He turned to Cale and nodded once, the kind of nod soldiers give each other before a mission where return is not promised. Cale nodded back, the pain in his body clear but his spirit still sharp. Together they moved through the underground tunnel that led deep into the forest, a path Rayner had built during the early days of the war, when paranoia had been his only companion. Bolt led the way, his steps fast and sure, as if he too understood the importance of their journey. After nearly an hour they reached a ridge overlooking a small valley hidden by rocks and mist. In the center stood an old structure covered in vines. Metal and moss, a mix of nature and something forgotten. Kale whispered this was not human, this was one of the first machines sent long ago, a seed meant to grow, but something went wrong and it never connected to the others. Raynor approached slowly, the sphere glowing in his hands like it knew where it belonged. The door opened before they touched it, silent and smooth, revealing a dark chamber inside filled with quiet hums and floating lights. They entered and the chamber responded with colors shifting to soft green and gold, as if recognizing something in Kale. At the center of the room was a console shaped like a circle with hollow rings spinning slowly. Kale placed his hand on it and the entire room came alive with sound, light and data. Images flooded the walls again, maps, formulas, signals, voices from distant stars. Kale turned to Raynor and spoke, words that shook the air like thunder. In a whisper, we can stop them, but we need time, and time is the only thing they will not give. The chamber was still alive with lights moving like waves on water, every wall speaking a different language through color and sound, yet somehow Raynor understood the feeling behind it all: danger, hope, loss, purpose. Kale sat against the wall, breathing slow but steady, his eyes watching the glowing symbols as if they were memories written in light. Raynor stood near the console, the floating rings now calm, waiting for the next command, waiting for trust. Bolt lay near the entrance, his ears flicking at every distant sound in the forest. Above, alert, ready, unshaken, Kale pointed toward a pattern in the lights. A signal hidden beneath the layers, a code moving like a shadow behind the data. He said it was the heartbeat of the mothership. The place where all signals connect, where all decisions begin and end. If they could reach it and plant a disruption, the entire network would collapse. The second wave would be blind, deaf, helpless. Raynor asked one question: how much time? Kale looked away as if the answer was too heavy to carry, then raised 3 fingers slowly. 3 days before the signal reaches full strength, 3 days before the harvest begins, 3 days to change everything or lose everything. Raynor nodded once, then began recording the data into a secure drive, locking it inside the steel box with the sphere. They needed a way out. They needed help, but help was not something Raynor trusted easily. He had been betrayed before, left behind by the very command he once served. Yet one name came to his mind, someone who owed him more than just a favor: Major Havith, a Black Ops agent, now living off-grid. If anyone could get them close to the mothership, it was her. Raynor sealed the chamber behind them, hiding the console beneath layers of camouflage and vines. Kale walked slowly, leaning on Bolt, who stayed beside him without question. As they returned to the bunker, the air felt colder, the sky above now flickering with unnatural light like the stars themselves were warning them. They entered just before dawn and rested for a few hours, but sleep came like broken waves, shallow and restless. Raynor woke to the sound of a soft alarm movement outside. Not animals, not storm. Scanners, military, human. Raynor cursed under his breath and checked the monitors. 3 figures in black armor moving through the woods toward the cabin. Weapons drawn, signals pulsing from their visors. They had picked up alien tech, the sphere had called them. Raynor grabbed his rifle and opened a hidden panel beneath the floor, pushing Kale and Bolt inside, then sealing it with old boards and dust. Seconds later, the door burst open, voices, sharp commands echoing off the stone walls. 2 men and 1 woman, all armed, all silent, all scanning. Raynor stood calm, hands raised, pretending to be confused, angry, tired. He said he saw something crash in the forest days ago, but found nothing but broken trees and smoke. They searched the bunker, tore through his gear, questioned his past. He gave them half-truths, wrapped in old soldier language, enough to satisfy, enough to bore them. They left with warnings and cold stares, but took nothing as soon as the sound of their boots faded. Raynor opened the floor and helped Kale out. Kale looked shaken, not from fear, but from the memory of being hunted again. Raynor knew they had little time. If the military found them once, they would return next time with orders not to search, but to erase. He contacted Havith, using a signal only she would recognize, hidden inside a song from the old war. 3 hours later, a reply came with one word: move. Raynor packed everything: the sphere, the data, the medkits, the maps. Kale moved slower now, his body fighting to keep up. Bolt stayed close, supporting him like a second shadow. As they reached the edge of the forest, a small aircraft hovered above the trees. Painted in black with no markings, it landed without sound, and the door opened, revealing Havith. Same cold eyes, same scar across her jaw, same no-nonsense stare. She said nothing, just looked at Kale, then at Raynor, then nodded. Inside the craft, silence hung like a curtain. Kale rested in a seat, strapped in tightly as the ship lifted into the sky. Havith finally spoke, asking Raynor if he had lost his mind helping an enemy carrying alien tech, risking his life. Raynor replied with a question of his own: what if he is not the enemy? Havith stared at him for a long moment, then looked at Bolt, who was sitting beside Kale, without fear, without hesitation. Sometimes dogs see what people cannot. That night, the ship crossed mountains, rivers broken, cities and dead lands, flying low under the radar, heading for a place where human rules no longer applied, a place only ghosts and secrets lived, a place close enough to strike the mothership. Kale whispered one sentence before closing his eyes: they will come for us, and they will not stop. The sky was painted with layers of fire and shadow as the aircraft moved silently through forgotten airways where no satellite watched and no signal lived, only echoes of the past floating like smoke over broken earth. Inside the ship, the light was dim. The walls pulsed with soft energy and the air carried the hum of an old machine. Still alive, still aware, Cale lay quiet, strapped to a stretcher, his chest rising with effort, his skin pale. His glow almost gone, like a fading ember waiting for wind. Raina stood near the cockpit, eyes fixed on the horizon, mind heavy with 1,000 questions and one clear mission. Havith sat at the controls, her fingers dancing across the interface with precision born from years of shadows, her face cold but her eyes sharp, calculating everything and missing nothing. She broke the silence with words like stone dropped in still water. He will not survive another day without treatment. Raina nodded once and asked where. She gave a name not spoken. In years, a place hidden even from those who built it. Black Hollow, a facility buried deep in the desert, once used for illegal experiments, now left to rot beneath sand and silence. It held alien tech stolen from warfields and doctors who worked for no country, only for results. Raina agreed without question, because Cale was more than information, now more than warning. He was proof, and proof needed to live. The ship turned southwest, racing against time and heat as the desert grew beneath them, wide and empty like a grave with no name. They landed as night fell, the sand glowing silver under the moon and the air dry like paper. The entrance to Black Hollow was beneath a broken tower disguised as rubble, with rusted panels hiding the path. Raina moved first, followed by Havith, then Bolt, then the stretcher floating quietly behind them, carried by small magnetic lifts. Inside, the ground opened into darkness, the walls cracked, the air thick with dust and metal. They passed rooms filled with machines, long dead screens, shattered wires like vines growing out of the walls. In the center was a chamber still alive, powered by something unknown, its lights soft and blue, its doors sealed with handprint codes long forgotten. Havith pulled a chip from her coat and pressed it to the lock. The door opened with a hiss and the past breathed again. Inside, they found what they needed, an old medical unit, half alien, half human, with a pod that adjusted to the shape of the body placed within. Cale was lowered inside and the machine came to life, scanning, healing, stabilizing. Raina watched every light, every signal, until the pod sealed and the process began. Time moved slow, hours passed like years. Bolt never left the side of the pod, sitting like a soldier guarding a friend. Raina sat nearby, cleaning his weapon, eyes on the pod, mind somewhere between fear and memory. Havith returned with a small black case and opened it in front of Raina. Inside was a weapon not made for war but for infiltration, sleek, silent, and able to disable alien systems from within. She said the mothership had one weakness, a core built on living code, something that reacts to fear, something that adapts to destroy it. One had to get close, very close. Raina asked how close. She answered with one word: inside. Raina looked at the pod, then at the weapon, then at the map glowing on the wall, showing the orbit of the mothership and the pulse of the network growing faster each hour. He understood what must be done, not just a strike, a sacrifice. Cale awoke before dawn, his voice low but stronger than before. He said the core was not just code but memory, a living mind grown from the first harvests. To kill it meant to enter its mind, and no one had ever returned from that place. Raina listened without blinking, his face calm, his heart steady. He had made peace with danger long ago. Cale said he would go. Raina refused, said it was not his burden alone, said humans must stand to not just be saved. Havith watched them both, and for the first time she said nothing, because some choices do not need orders. They prepared for the journey, the ship refueled, weapons checked, coordinates locked. The mission was now more than survival. It was the turning point. Both stood at the ramp, watching the desert wind blow across the sand with eyes that understood more than words could say. Raina placed a hand on Cale's shoulder, then another on Bolt's head, then stepped onto the ship. Ready, the sun rose behind them, casting long shadows across the sand as the engines roared to life. A man, a dog, an enemy now, a friend, and a mission that would change the future of two worlds. As the ship lifted into the sky, the pod still healing, and the plan set in silence, Raina closed his eyes and whispered a single promise: no matter what happens, they will know we fought back. The sky above shimmered like broken glass as the ship moved through cloud and static signals rising higher. With each second, the air around it trembling like a breath held too long, waiting to be released inside. The cabin's silence sat heavy but not empty. It was filled with thoughts unspoken and fears too real to share. Raina stood near the front watching the stars appear one by one, each a reminder of how small Earth truly was in the map of all things. Cale rested in the medpod, eyes half open, his skin brighter now, but his voice still quiet, like the last light of a firebolt lay beside him. Tail still, body still, only his eyes moving, always alert, always loyal. Havith worked at the console, her fingers steady, her eyes fixed on numbers that changed with every pulse of the mothership's approach. She said they had 22 minutes before the window opened, one shot, one chance. After that, the core would close and the signal would complete its final sync with Earth. Raina opened the case and lifted the device, a small weapon shaped like a hollow stone, warm to the touch, almost alive. Cale said the core would try to protect itself by showing memories, by turning thoughts into traps, into loops that never end. The device had to be placed directly inside the living matrix and activated with a specific code, a code Cale had buried inside the sphere. Raina memorized the sequence, each number like a beat in a countdown, not just for the mission but for everything left behind. They reached orbit and the mothership appeared ahead, rising like a dark mountain floating in the stars, its surface smooth and endless covered in lights that blinked like eyes. HFY brought the ship close, using old protocols stolen long ago, hiding their presence behind static bursts and debris. They slipped through the outer defense like a shadow. Passing through smoke inside the docking bay, there was no sound, only light moving across the floor like waves on a dead sea. Rayna stepped out, first weapon in one hand, sphere in the other, heart steady, voice quiet. Kale followed, weak but walking, eyes sharp, reading every signal, every shift in energy. Bolt moved without fear, nose low, ears high, ready for anything. HFY stayed in the ship, engines hot, escape plan locked, but her face showed she knew the odds and they were not kind. The team moved through corridors made of metal that breathed every step, echoing through walls that remembered pain. Kale led them toward the center, passing chambers filled with strange machines, tubes full of liquid in shapes that looked almost human, almost live. The core chamber stood behind a gate sealed with thought, not code. Kale touched it, and it opened like water parting for something older than fear. Inside was silence, not empty, alive. The core hung above them, a sphere of light and shadow spinning slowly, each movement sending ripples through the air like whispers from long ago. Rayna stepped forward, holding the device's hand, shaking not from fear but from weight. He reached the center and placed the device into a slot that opened like a wound, then turned to Kale, waiting for the final sequence. Kale began to speak, but the room changed. The lights turned to fire, the floor turned to grass. Rayna found himself standing in a memory not his own, a battlefield, earth burning, screams. Lost. Kale beside him, falling. Bolt not moving, pain. Rayna closed his eyes and whispered the first code. The vision cracked, another came. His cabin quiet, safe, but empty. He was alone forever. Rayna spoke the second code louder. This time the core shook. The light faded, the room began to return, but one last vision came, his mother smiling, saying his name, telling him to come home. He almost answered, but then he saw Kale standing beside him, holding Bolt, who looked up with eyes that knew. Rayna whispered the final code. The device glowed, the core screamed, not in sound but in color and light and pressure, then silence, real this time. The core dimmed, then cracked, then vanished. The lights across the ship went dark, one by one, falling like stars into a black sea. Rayna fell to one knee, heart racing, breath wild but alive. Kale reached out and helped him stand, his face calm, his eyes full. They ran back through the corridors, now shaking with collapse, the ship breaking from within. HFY opened the ramp as the dock crumbled around them, fire and metal chasing their heels. They jumped inside just as the mothership began to fall, not down but apart into pieces of memory and machine. The ship flew fast, pulling away as light exploded behind them, brighter than the sun, louder than thought. Inside, Rayna sat on the floor holding Bolt, who was safe and still and real. Kale leaned against the wall, eyes closed, a soft smile on his face. HFY said nothing, just flew toward the dock where Earth waited below. The stars no longer blinked like watchers, they blinked like witnesses. The ship moved through silence like a shadow returning to its source, the stars behind them now quiet, no longer burning, no longer watching, just resting after what had been seen. Rayna sat near the edge of the cabin, his eyes half closed, his hands resting on Bolt's fur as the loyal dog breathed slow and steady, a calm rhythm in the space between chaos and peace. Kale leaned against the wall, his body weak but his spirit still whole, a faint glow beneath his skin like the last light of a The storm now passed. HFY piloted without speaking, her eyes locked on the horizon where the blue curve of Earth began to rise once more, like a promise not yet broken. They had done what no army could do, they had broken the chain, they had stopped the signal, they had given Earth a voice again, but now came the part that no map could guide, no weapon could win, no machine could calculate. The world below did not know what had happened, not yet. Rayna watched as clouds rolled across oceans and mountains held their breath and cities waited in silence, unaware of how close they had come to being lost. He thought of the bunker, the forest, the night when Bolt first barked into the dark and found more than an enemy, more than a threat. He had found Kale, he had found truths. The ship landed on a quiet plateau hidden in the north where wind was the only sound, and snow had not yet melted from the last long winter. Rayna stepped out first, the air cold and sharp against his face like memory made real. Kale followed, wrapped in an old jacket borrowed from HFY, his steps slow but sure. Bolt ran ahead, his paws kicking up dust and frost, his tail high, his heart strong. HFY stayed near the ship, her face unreadable, her presence steady. Like the mountain itself, Rayna walked to the edge and looked out over the valley where trees moved gently in the breeze. And the sky held no fire, no storm, no threat. Kale stood beside him and spoke with a voice now clear, now strong. Your people have a chance now, you must choose what to do with it. Rayna nodded, not an answer but an understanding, because choice was the only war that never ended. They stayed there for hours, saying little, watching everything. Later that night, around a fire built from dry branches and old habit, Rayna finally asked the question he had carried since the bunker. Why did you help us? Kale looked into the flames and spoke without pause, without fear. Because I saw what they refused to see, because I felt what they had forgotten, because your dog looked at me and did not see a killer. Rayna smiled at that, a small thing but real. Bolt lay between them, his ears twitching as the fire popped and the wind moved past, like an old friend just passing through. Kale reached into his coat and pulled out a crystal no larger than a stone, smooth and bright. He placed it in Rayna's hand and said it held a record of everything that happened, every image, every word, every moment. Rayna held it tight like a weight and a gift. Havith stepped forward, then her voice low, her eyes on the crystal, not with fear but with purpose. This story must be told, not with anger, not with pride, but with truth. Rayna agreed, not with speeches, not with orders, but with action. They built a signal post the next day using parts from the ship and old tools from Havith's pack. It was not much, just enough to send a story across the world, not a warning, not a threat, just a story about a man, a dog, an enemy, and a choice about fear and trust and something that lived between the two. They sent it out and waited across Earth. People listened. Some doubted, some feared, but many believed, and for the first time in a long time borders felt thin and voices felt close, because the story was not about saving the world, it was about choosing to try. Kale remained in the mountains, watched over by Rayna and Bolt and Havith, who returned often with supplies and silence. He said little but smiled more. Bolt never left his side. One day as snow began to fall, Kale looked at the sky and said it was beautiful, and Rayna said yes. Not because it was safe, but because it was free, and in that freedom something new had begun, something human, something more.